The Boston Celtics have had a very interesting offseason. After having a disappointing season last year, it was clear that change was definitely needed. Danny Ainge stepped down after the Celtics got eliminated by the Nets, ironically the same team that he finessed in one of the biggest fleeces in league history 8 years ago, and head coach Brad Stevens got promoted to president of basketball operations. In the 2 months since Brad Stevens has had the job, I think he's had a pretty good offseason. The Celtics roster is now a lot deeper. It looks a lot more formidable than it did last year. So this video will grade all of the Celtics moves this offseason and give them grades. But before we continue, if you like content like this, please like the video and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a banger. Now let's get started. The Celtics' first major move of the offseason was to trade Kemba Walker along with a first and second round pick in exchange for Al Horford and Moses Brown, and a second round pick in 2023. I give this move a B+. Kemba Walker was initially a great pickup for Boston as he helped them to get all the way to the conference finals back in 2020, but last season was a down year for Kemba. He missed the first 2 months of the year with a knee injury and initially looked like a shell of himself in his return to the court. At the end of the season, the Celtics were ready to cut ties with Kemba, so trading him and getting out of the $60+ million he was still owed is a huge win. Al Horford is a pretty nice pickup for Boston. He's shown in OKC that he's still a pretty good big man, averaging 14 points and 7 rebounds a game last year. Horford will help to upgrade the center position, and he has a history with the team as he played on the Celtics for 3 years of his career and even was an all-star. But the real benefit of this trade was that it saved cap space. Horford has a partial guarantee for $26 million for the 2022-23 season, which saves Boston about $9 million in cap room. They're going to need that cap room to sign Bradley Beal in the summer of 2022, so overall, this was a pretty good move for Boston. The second major move of Boston was to hire Ime Udoka as head coach, and I give this move a B+. Udoka doesn't have any experience as an NBA head coach, but I'm very confident that he'll be a good coach because he comes from the Greg Popovich coaching tree. Popovich is arguably the greatest NBA head coach of all time, and former assistant coaches of his tend to go on to be successful. The best examples of this are Monty Williams and Mike Budenholzer, who have both become pretty good coaches and faced off in last year's finals. I'm sure that after being an assistant coach for Popovich on the Spurs for 7 years, Udoka is more than prepared to be a head coach for the Celtics and will do a good job. The next move by Boston was to draft Bagaran with the 45th pick in the draft, and this move gets a B. The Celtics didn't have a first round pick due to the Kemba Walker trade, so this was their only pick of the draft. Bagaran is very talented, and at just 18 years old, he's viewed as a player with a high upside. He's 6'6" with a long 7-foot wingspan, and he has great athleticism and burst. He can attack the basket and he's an active defender, but he really needs to develop as a shooter and decision maker on the court. Bagaran was a nice prospect for Boston to take in the second round, and with the right development, he could become a very good player, so this was a nice pick. Another trade Boston made this offseason was to send out Moses Brown and Tristan Thompson in a 3-team trade that landed them Josh Richardson, Chris Dunn, and Bruno Fernando. The Celtics no longer needed Thompson and Brown, and they got back some players that could help them improve their team for next year, so I give this move a B+. Josh Richardson is a pretty good role player that should be a nice fit in Boston. At 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan, he's a good defender that can guard multiple positions on the court. The Celtics will certainly need his defense. After ranking as a top 5 defense for each of the past 3 seasons, the Celtics defense fell off a cliff this year, only ranking 15th in defensive efficiency on the year. The same defensive intensity that we usually see in Brad Stevens coached teams just wasn't there this year, so adding a plus defender in Josh Richardson should help the Celtics become a top defense again. Richardson can also add to Boston's offense. Unfortunately, he is a below average 3-point shooter, shooting just 33% from outside last year, but he's someone that can create his own shot off the dribble and set up his teammates for easy baskets. In his last year in Miami, when he was given a bigger role than he had in Dallas and Philly, he averaged 16 points and 4 assists per game, so he has shown that he's more than capable of being a scorer and a playmaker. Last season, the Celtics desperately needed some other ball handlers and shot creators outside of Tatum and Brown, so this was a good pickup for Boston. They also acquired another defensive-minded guard in Chris Dunn. Unfortunately for Dunn, he was injured for pretty much the entirety of last year, but when healthy, he's one of the best defensive guards in the league. In his last healthy year in Chicago, he nearly received enough votes to make the all-defensive team. He may only be 6'3", but he's got a long 6'9" wingspan, which allows him to guard players much bigger than him. He's also a great off-ball defender, averaging 2 steals per game his last year in Chicago, which ranks second in the entire league behind Ben Simmons. Dunn is another player that'll help to make Boston a top 10 defense in the league next season. And the last player that the Celtics acquired in the trade was the 6'9" big man Bruno Fernando. Fernando was a promising prospect in the 2019 NBA draft, but he's been disappointing in his first couple of years in the league. He can finish around the basket and protect the rim, but I wouldn't expect him to play too much next year with the big men in front of him on the Celtics. It's also worth noting that all 3 of these contracts expire after next season, which will help to open up cap space for the summer of 2022. The Celtics also gained a $9.7 million trade exception out of this deal, which will be useful in future trade negotiations. So overall, this trade was beneficial in a multitude of ways, which is why I gave it a B+. In terms of free agency, the Celtics didn't make too many signings. They picked up Enes Kanter on a veteran minimum contract to make for his second stint with Boston. I give this move a C. He's a good scorer in the post and a great rebounder, but he's a disaster defensively. His lack of defense has made him unplayable in the playoffs for nearly his entire career. I still remember Billy Donovan getting caught on camera saying, "Can't play Kanter," after Kanter allowed yet another dunk by Clint Capella. Unfortunately for Kanter, center is the one position where you can't hide on defense because your center is your last line of defense. The playoffs is where his lack of rim protection and inability to defend the pick and roll become completely exposed. So Kanter will give Boston some good regular season minutes, but he won't play too much in the playoffs, which is why the grade here is only a C. And finally, the last major move by the Celtics was to sign Dennis Schroeder to a 1-year $6 million deal, and I'm giving this move an A. The reason I give this move such a high grade is because Dennis helps to address the needs of the Celtics, and at $6 million, that's an absolute bargain. The Celtics were pretty weak at point guard last season, and they desperately needed some scoring outside of their star duo of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Dennis will help to address those areas. Schroeder was pretty bad for the Lakers last year in the playoffs, but he had a good regular season. On the year, he averaged 15 points and 6 assists per game and gave the Lakers some much needed scoring and playmaking at the point guard position. And when LeBron and Anthony Davis went down with injury, Schroeder helped to keep the Lakers afloat by increasing his production, helping the Lakers to play roughly 500 ball in their absence. He's also good on defense, where he may be short at just 6'1", but he more than makes up for it with a long 6'8" wingspan and a high motor on the defensive end. Schroeder played a significant role on a Lakers defense that ranked first in the league last year. Of course, Schroeder's lack of an outside shot is a major weakness in his game, as he only shot 33% from 3 last year, but despite that flaw, his scoring and playmaking is really going to help out this Celtics team. And that's all of Boston's major moves this offseason. The Celtics didn't make a bunch of splashy moves, but I think they had a pretty good offseason. This Celtics team is now much deeper than last year, and they're much better defensively on paper. Last season, a huge part of the problem was that Boston barely had anyone else that could score the ball outside of their star duo of Brown and Tatum, but now the Celtics have several players that'll score in the double digits. They also needed to get better defensively, and they added several great perimeter defenders like Chris Dunn and Josh Richardson. And while Brad Stevens was an amazing head coach, it was clear that the Celtics team needed a new voice, and I think Ime Udoka is the perfect man for the job. The Celtics probably aren't a true contender in the East next year, but with the additions they made, they should improve, and they should be able to battle it out for the 4 or 5 seed. and with just a few moves, they could create the cap room to sign Bradley Beal in 2022, who reportedly is really close with Jason Tatum. Right now, Boston is in really good shape, and the pathway to become championship contenders is clearly there. Anyway guys, that's going to be the end of today's video. Do you like the Celtics offseason moves? Do you agree with my grades? Do you like the current direction of the team? Tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed this and want to see more great content like this, and have a great rest of your day.